Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this virtual event brought to you by Nokia in partnership with Yugo. Wonderful to have you all here. My name is Ben Thompson. I am delighted to be your host for the next hour. We've got insights, opinions, fascinating takeaways, all centered around this concept of how we secure our telco networks. How is the landscape changing? And what do we need to consider in order to prepare for whatever is coming next? Because, make no bones about it, this is a fast-moving space. In the past 12 months alone, we've seen the Salt Typhoon attacks, dubbed the worst telecom hack in our nation's history by Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Mark Warner. We've seen regulators clamping down on data privacy, with the FCC fining several US wireless carriers a total of $196 million for disclosing sensitive location data back in April 2024. And of course, we've seen rapid advances in AI and quantum computing over the past year, both of which promise to revolutionize the security space from a threat perspective as well as in terms of response. It highlights the rising stakes for telecoms in North America. Strong data protection and regulatory compliance are critical to maintaining customer trust, avoiding penalties, and most importantly of all, safeguarding the nation. Clearly, we have a lot to discuss, and this event is going to be full of conversation to help unpack how telco security leaders can navigate these complexities. In just a moment's time, we're going to be hearing from the brilliant Jim Hodges, Research Director for Cloud and Security over at analyst firm Heavy Reading, on how to navigate the new threat landscape and stay ahead of the curve. And we follow that with a dive into how AI and quantum security are reshaping the future of telecoms. That's with David Turkington from the GSMA, Dr. Srinivas Patiprolu from Nokia, and Verizon's Hugo Munoz Sanchez. Throughout it all, we'll also be providing multiple opportunities for you folks in the audience to get involved. We'll be running interactive polls to get your thoughts on some of these issues, plus you can pop comments or questions in the chat at any time. Most importantly, we'll also be looking to bring you up here on stage to interact with our speakers yourselves. So do let our wonderful producer Carl know if you would like to get involved, and we will get you up here to share your thoughts. As you can see, we have lots to get through and we have limited time. So without further ado, let's kick things off and get some context for why we are all here today. Our first guest is Research Director over at Heavy Reading, now part of Ondia, where he focuses on the application and security impact of cloud technologies in the telecommunications industry. His research primarily centres on the security implications introduced by cloud and cloud-based technologies, particularly in the context of 5G networks. Here to talk about what technology change means for the security profession and how we bridge IT and telecom security in order to combat emerging cyber threats, please put your virtual hands together for the wonderful Jim Hodges. Jim, wonderful to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Ben. So, as Ben said, my coverage at Heavy Reading is really focusing on applications in the cloud and 5G. So what I wanted to do today is kind of start the discussion off by looking at some of the trends that I've seen over the last maybe 12, 14 months in a North American context. So what I'm going to be doing is just kind of putting out some of the, the breaches and the DDoS attacks that I see of note, that and really kind of what made them sort of unique in my mind and why I think there's something that is something worth we have to keep monitoring. And I'll also talk about AI. Obviously, we're going to center on AI. AI plays it's a valuable tool both on both sides of the equation. But we'll talk about that. And I've got one chart from a recent survey that was completed with my colleagues at Omdia with Nokia. But I just wanted to start first.
Yeah. Well, let's get you up there, Jim. We'll get your slides up so you can walk us through your thoughts, and we'll also be taking questions from you folks in the audience as well. So do let us know if you have any questions for Jim, and we will bring you up here after he is finished. But Jim, why don't I hand over to you? You can see your slides now. I'll get out of your way, and I'll be back to facilitate those questions later.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. Okay, we can jump this slide. Next slide. Okay. So what I'm going to start first, I'm going to talk about DDoS. I'm going to talk about a number of breaches. I'm going to talk about Salt Typhoon, all these things. But I wanted to kind of start off with DDoS. Obviously, DDoS is something from a security practitioner is a major concern. And it's clear to me that 2024 was a strong year for DDoS. In fact, I think we keep saying this over and over again. I've been following DDoS for 7+ years, and it's always been a very much a growth industry from the days of DDoS for hire from I think 2006. So this is something that's been a long thorn in the side of service providers and enterprises. But it's really, to me, there's a couple of different things I'll maybe talk a little bit about in a North American context. I mean, when we talk about DDoS, historically we've always talked about it in a geopolitical consideration, and it's obviously still very much a factor. But I think for me, over the last maybe 14 months, it's become clear to me that really everything is now vulnerable to attacks, including sporting events. I mean, we've seen sporting events in Europe and in North America sometimes. So to be clear, this is not a new phenomenon. But I think just some of the recent notable DDoS attacks that I saw in North America was obviously the former Twitter one in March of this year. It was network impacting. It's not clear who it was, possibly the anonymous hacker group, but it was basically network impacting and obviously a major attack. And really talking about sporting events in North America, we saw the online betting organization was hit by one 1 terabit brute force attack. I call it the Ovechkin attack because it was believed to be tied to Alexander Ovechkin tying the most goal record of 892 in April. So clearly, DDoS is something that it's been a major threat for service providers and for their customers for years. It's not getting any softer, and we're starting to see, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, later, about AI being a way to maybe help them with DDoS attacks as well. So all these things I think are really relevant in the context of saying that DDoS is never going to go away. So service providers need to be vigilant. They have to help manage their customers as well in terms of what's happening with DDoS. And obviously there's a couple of wild cards. The industry is always dynamic, always looking for new ways to block and mitigate DDoS. And we have the recent announcement of the U.S. Justice Department seizing 9 DDoS higher domains in May of this year. So, will that have some impact? I think it certainly will have some impact on some sort of a short or long-term basis. So that's kind of what I'm seeing in sort of DDoS. As I said, if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about when does typhoon season start. So obviously we're all familiar with the success of the Cell Typhoon Advanced Persistent Threat that came into, I guess, became publicly aware in late 2024. And I think in some respects, it really, I think Ben had some quotes up front. It was really just the scope of it, being able to infiltrate over an 18-month period and affect so many service providers on a global basis. I think that's what kind of made it notable. Obviously all these CSPs had very well hardened security postures, and they weren't doing anything, I would say, out of the ordinary. They were utilizing a 7-year-old well-documented router vulnerability. They had stolen credentials as well. So obviously, even outside of the United States and North America, there's 12 others as well. So I mean, I guess to me, the real question here is, are major breaches of this kind now an annual season reality? Is it something we're going to be seeing repeatable in 2025, or is it just a singular, maybe one to many event? And I think honestly, trends appear that we are going to see more of these happening as we go forward. Obviously, service providers spend a lot of time and have highly skilled SOCs, and they do their due diligence. The fact is that these groups are continuing to be more sophisticated and having new tools available to them. So it's something that I think is something we have to be very vigilant of, and not assume that it can never happen again. But clearly, it's something that I think the learnings from Cell Typhoon are something that all service providers in the industry in general have really learned from over the last 18 months. And I think it's going to make the industry more secure from the experience. But I don't think we can just fully discount that this will never happen again. Next slide, please. So ransomware, I do want to talk about ransomware. It seems that ransomware has been seen a real uptake in terms of breaches in the last, I guess, sort of 14 to 18 months. And I'm just going to call out one here. This one's kind of stood out to me because, clearly everybody is fair game in the enterprise space, from financial healthcare and educational. Anybody, any company, any enterprise is fair game. But this one kind of stood out to me, and there was a couple of things that made it, I guess, unique in my own mind, and that is that it occurred in late 2024. So this is the PowerSchool software breach that occurred. And it was basically, it's known to basically include stolen student data and maybe some security numbers as well. This is all public information. But I think what's interesting is that when I looked at this, and I've been following it for the last 9 months, what I think we do know is that even when the ransomware demands were made from initially, that an initial ransom was paid to the bad actors, but we've also seen after that now the bad actors are going after each individual board. So when they basically encrypted some of this data, they're now going up to individual boards in Ontario, North Carolina, and Alberta. And so, I mean, to me, this one has, in my own mind, it's received limited press. To me, it represents a major North American educational institution breach, and it really just highlights the trend that I think educational institutions are increasingly becoming targets of interest. But clearly, everybody, any enterprise is now a target of interest. But I think this one's interesting because of the double sort of demand scenario and the one to many. So it's clear that from a single infection, the bad actors are able to gain a lot of leverage with a lot of enterprise and a lot of enterprise customers throughout North America. So I think this is something we need to be also more vigilant of as well, just to this context of sort of this one to many is really an example of just how powerful and pervasive these ransomware attacks can be. So next slide, please. So maybe just talk about a couple of other breaches of note. This one is the 2024 software hosted third-party cloud storage one. This one's well known as well. To me, I think what's important about this one is it also is kind of shows how large organizations and even enterprises or even companies like Satender and Ticketmaster can be really also targeted and be successfully hacked. So I think this one is well documented and well known. But maybe the good news is that, again, because of the industry collaboration, the hacker believed to be behind the breach has been arrested. So this may limit further infections as well. So next slide, please. And this one's a very recent one. So when I was putting this presentation together over the last couple of weeks, sorry, I wanted to kind of get one that was kind of a little bit newer and something that kind of tweaked my interest. Was this one on April 25th, Nova Scotia Power in Nova Scotia, Canada, basically announced that they had several servers had been breached, and it wasn't clear if any of the data had been compromised. So there's no power outages, but clearly there are multiple concerns here, and this is considered critical infrastructure. And Nova Scotia Power is owned by Mera, there's also 2.6 million customers in Canada, the Caribbean, and the United States as well. So this one to me is interesting in that, what are the next steps here? Is it a one-to-many infection? Is it ransomware as a service? Is it something that we're going to see later on as well that's going to be just kind of be bubbling for some time and then really become a major critical outage down the road? So again, this one is not maybe all that unique in terms of what's happening in the industry on sort of a daily and weekly basis, but this one just kind of stood out to me because it's clear that it was a pretty sophisticated attack, and it's not really clear yet what was compromised and what the next steps are. So this is one that I'm considering to watch as well. So those are kind of a high level view, and I hope that this will help the panelists, give them some sort of insights to talk things through as well. But I do want to go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about topics for further study. So these are kind of some of the things that I'm going to be looking at in 2025. We all know that, as I said, AI is a powerful tool. It can be used both as a tool for positive and for negative implications in a security context. So, the whole context of AI is becoming, I think, something that's really driving more personalized attack. I mean, on the personal level, we all see it. Just the phishing content, so phishing attacks to gain access to credentials. I've seen, the phishing content really improving. We've seen bad actors using AI to even, emulate, voices and things like that. So that's not necessarily in the context of data hacks, but it is in the context of bad actors showing that they can leverage AI. And, we're starting to see maybe AI using in DDoS attacks, being able to use it for scanning maybe vulnerable servers, being able to look at how to mitigate the traffic pattern so that it doesn't look like a DDoS attack until the last minute. So there's a number of different ways here. One of the things that I don't think has gotten a lot of maybe initial attention that I'm kind of interested in is the impact of initial access brokers. These are brokers that really just basically infiltrate some organizations, whether service providers, enterprise. They basically gain some sort of access, but they don't obviously make that aware to the host, but they then turn around at some point and they sell that to bad actors, either for impact to help them with ransomware or DDoS attacks. So that's something I think we have to be vigilant about, as well as initial access of brokers have been around for some time, but do they now have access to multiple access points in a single company or a single service provider? Can they sell those? So can we see maybe one attack being emulated later on with a second access point that wasn't even known? So it's an important topic that I think is something worth watching. And just I want to watch the increase in frequency of one-to-many infections. Obviously the Snowflake and PowerSchool or third-party software vulnerabilities, those kind of show the vulnerabilities there. But I think also we have to think about AI as well, how they'll use that. So these are just my own topics for further study. I'm sure my esteemed colleagues here on the panel will have more thoughts as well. But I did want to share one chart before we go on. That is related to AI to kind of cue up the discussion for AI. The next slide, please. So as I said, this is basically a chart from a survey that OMDIA, my colleagues at OMDIA did with Nokia last year. And what they were really trying to do was kind of pin down how they could use Gen AI to help them in their security operations, in their SOCs, and really kind of help them improve their accuracy of threat analysis. So I think it shows here that no surprise that really it's all about the first three here are really about improving accuracy of threat analysis. Being able to automate routine security tasks is important as well, because obviously those security tasks are really, I guess, encountering AI-driven attacks, and then also enhancing threat detection capabilities as well. That's kind of, I think, sort of the three that kind of stood out for me. So I hope this has been helpful. As I said, this is an extremely dynamic and fluid environment that we live in today. The attacks from week to week change, and it's very dynamic, and I don't think it's going to get any less dynamic unfortunately, in the near future as we move forward. So it's clear that service providers need to maintain their high level of vigilance just to be able to keep stride and really stay one step ahead of the bad actors.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. Many thanks, Jim, for kicking things off. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Folks, if you do have any questions for Jim, then do let us know. Just pop producer Carl a message in the chat and we will bring you up here. Maybe I can just dig into some of those ideas that you were sharing there in a bit more detail, Jim. You mentioned the kind of the growing threat presented by DDoS, sophisticated DDoS attacks, by ransomware as well. How are you seeing organizations respond to that growing threat?
I mean, yeah, I think when you look at what service providers and the industry is doing in general, they're doing things like taking down domains, that are well known in the industry from all the various industry groups that do monitoring. So they're taking those are positive steps. They're also, I think, from a CSP perspective, service provider perspective, I think they're looking at their own security frameworks, and they're really being able to, basically update those with new tools, with AI automation tools, or working with their vendors and the ecosystem partners to really help them do that. But obviously, it's still best practices, backup data, always have, a SOC team that's doing hypothesis and threat monitoring. Just basically don't assume that the threats aren't going to change in nature. Don't assume that your security framework is kind of a silver bullet that is not going to be having to evolve, because everything is evolving, because the threat landscape is just so fluid.
Yeah, absolutely. Fluid and fast moving, absolutely. One of the things you mentioned, of course, was AI, and I know that's something we're going to be touching upon as we go deeper into our conversations here today. But yeah, how are you seeing this, some of the risks of AI being used to improve the sophistication of these attacks? Where are you seeing things evolve there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just pretty early days because obviously this is something that's evolving so quickly. But I think we do know that, as I said, phishing content is something that's, phishing is a very mature cyber tool, cyber threat vector. But if you can make the content so much better, and as I said, I think on a personal level, we all recognize that it is getting a lot better from sort of the really poorly shaped emails and phishing attacks we used to get. They're much better now. The headers look better, the contents, the voices, the graphics, everything is done. And obviously, I think bad actors are looking at how they can use AI to help them sort of, I guess, monitor the industry, the whole network that they're looking to, that they're trying to attack for vulnerable servers and things like that. Just doing kind of a threat overall AI tool detection, and also being able to, if they can, sort of monitor and change the appearance of the traffic before the DDoS attack and so on. And ransomware obviously is something that is cleared because of phishing, obviously gaining access to credentials. If it's just one organization that has multiple customers and you get access to those credentials, then you can basically do a lot of damage. And that's why I highlighted some of those ransomware attacks.
Yeah, I mean, the sophistication of these attacks is increasing, as you say, on a daily basis. Everything from those more articulate emails, fewer spelling mistakes, right up to deep fakes and the like. How are firms defending against some of this growing sophistication?
Well, I think that the chart I showed just a few minutes ago kind of shows that service providers are really kind of looking at it from the basics, being able to automate their security operations, being able to help them in detecting it, help them look at is this maybe a traffic pattern that we've seen before? Has this been an AI-based threat? And we expect sort of make that mitigated traffic pattern something that becomes something that you can actually search for. Being able to also look at just sort of the timelines and estimate when maybe things like that. But I think ultimately, as an industry, we're moving into sort of proactive threat hunting, being able to use AI to kind of create algorithms and learn and Gen AI and agentic AI ultimately to help us be able to sort of say these are kind of the threats that we may see. There's a major sporting event coming up, so we can expect something to happen. These are maybe kind of the ways we could ask AI to kind of create different threat models that we could kind of run through the SOC and kind of give that SOC kind of a heads up on what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been a slightly asymmetric nature to this battle. Are you seeing the defense side being able to keep pace with the growing sophistication of those threats?
I think so, but it's I think as an industry we've always been kind of ahead of the curve, but it's a matter of how much of a head start do we have. And like I said, it's so dynamic because essentially this is an industry that we're always on defense. We can start doing some proactive threat hunting, but the bad actors are always evolving. They're always coming up with new approaches, and AI will help them maybe take them to the next step. So the service providers and the industry in general are going to have to use those same AI tools and get sort of that same kind of, separation from them and the cyber criminals.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay sharp. Jim, many thanks for sharing your thoughts here today. Plenty of food for thought and a great way to get us started. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Wonderful stuff. Many thanks, Jim. Okay, so in just a moment, we're going to welcome our fabulous panelists up here to dig into some of those ideas in a bit more detail, as well as to consider what advances in AI and quantum mean for security moving forwards. But before we do that, I would like to run a couple of quick audience polls, if I may, to get some thoughts from you folks here in the audience on how some of these concepts are landing. So you should see our first question appearing on screen now. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to answer that. That question is as follows. Which of the following do you perceive as the biggest security threat to the telecoms infrastructure? Is it cyber attacks? So what we heard from Jim there, ransomware, DDoS, nation state, etc. Is it insider threats? Is it supply chain attacks on telecoms equipment and software? Or is it AI-powered attacks? So that question again, which of the following do you perceive as the biggest security threat to the telecoms infrastructure? Cyber attacks, insider threats, supply chain attacks, AI-powered attacks. Give you just a moment or two to provide your answers to us. Okay, Producer Carl is telling me that most of you have got your answers in, so many thanks for that. We'll close that poll in 3, 2, 1. That poll is now closed. Many thanks. So our second question is focused on the evolution of autonomous networks and what that journey looks like for you. So in the second question, we would like you to answer the following. Which of the following elements of the autonomous networks architectural framework are most important to you? You can pick 3 answers here based on priorities in your own organization's autonomous journey. So is it AI ops insights for assurance? Is it subscriber experience? Is it security, service orchestration, unified inventory, sustainability? Pick 3 of those options. So which of those resonate with you in terms of your own autonomous networks journey? Once again, we'll leave that poll open just a moment or two for you to all get your thoughts across, as many of you voting as possible. Okay, so Carl's telling me again that most of you have now voted, which is great. Many thanks for your prompt response. We'll close that poll in 3, 2, 1. That poll is now closed. Okay, so appreciate you providing your thoughts. I'm sure we can dig into those results further with our panelists. And speaking of which, why don't I get them up here? So here to explore how emerging technologies such as AI and quantum are impacting on the telecom security space, as well as what emerging best practice looks like here. Please say hello to our fabulous panel. David Turkington, Head of Technology at the GSMA, Dr. Srinivas Bhattiprolu, Head of Global Pre-Sales and Advanced Consulting Services at Nokia, and Hugo Munoz Sanchez, Associate Director for Network Security Planning at Verizon. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you all.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Excellent stuff. Well, lovely to see you all. Yeah, I know you're all in different time zones. So, yeah, appreciate you beaming in from wherever in the world you are. Once again, folks, we'll be taking questions from you in the audience. So do let Carl know if something resonates with you and you want to chime in and have your say. Do let us know in the chat. Let's maybe start with some quick introductions if we can. David, maybe I'll come to you first. Give us the 20-second intro to David Turkington.
Hi, I'm David Turkington. I'm Head of Technology for APAC for GSMA. I'm based in Hong Kong, so it's 11:30 p.m. here. So if you see me yawning, forgive me. I've been in Hong Kong for some time, worked in network operators and vendors and system integrators. So I look after cybersecurity in APAC at the moment as well.
Excellent. Okay, many thanks, David. Let's come to you next. Hugo, please.
Thank you, Ben. Hello, everybody. My name is Hugo Munoz Sanchez. I'm the Associate Director of Network Security Planning in Verizon. I'm based out of New York City, so this is a time that quite works for me. I appreciate that. Part of the scope of my team is working on emerging technologies and how things like AI and quantum computing are going to shape the future of our telecom network in 3, 5, 10 years from now. So I'm very much looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, excellent. That's certainly what we're going to be focusing here as well. And Srini, let's maybe come to you if we can, please.
Hey, hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Srini. Don't bother about pronouncing my last name as it is with any Indian names. It's quite difficult to pronounce. I lead the global pre-sales as well as advanced consulting services, and I'm a security practitioner myself, where I engage with several communication service providers as well as enterprises in defining their future security blueprint as well as understanding their current security priorities. I'm based in Sunnyvale, California. Nice and sunny here. Pretty good time to get into the conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, great stuff, Srini. Good to have you here. We've got a real span of time zones here. And let's maybe start this conversation off, if we can, by revisiting the results of one of those polls. Let's maybe go to the first poll, which was asking around where you see the biggest threats, what's kind of top of mind for folks here. So, which of the following do you perceive as the biggest security threat to the telecom infrastructure? 60% of you there are saying cyber attacks. So, ransomware, all those things that Jim was talking about in the earlier presentation, with kind of a relative spread, 22% each for supply chain attacks and for the threats posed by AI. Nobody necessarily voting insider threats doesn't mean it's not a threat, I guess, folks. Probably just means that they are higher priorities on that list. But is there anything there that surprises you? Srini, maybe I'll come to you first. Do those results tally with the conversations, the research, the trends that you're seeing in this space?
Yeah, certainly they do. 60% is certainly because of the ransomware and the other attacks, which were alluded to by Jim as well in his presentation. But there's one startling fact that actually comes out is insider threats. Insider threats do have actually a very big role to play in the telcos. And I think while it is mentioned as zero, I would actually accord enough importance to the insider threats as well, because for any attack to materialize, it is actually the insider who it pretty much enables. So he or she who's an insider, if they are actually not understanding these challenges, and then Jim did talk about phishing as well, and how we've seen how phishing has evolved over a period of time with the introduction of Gen AI. But then if there is proper training that's actually accorded to the insiders, if the proper identity governance practices, proper privilege access management practices, which are inside the organization, I think you can certainly reduce the insider threats. And I think rest of the stuff, which is 22% for the other two, which is supply chain as well as for the AI powered attacks, is absolutely in line with what we see in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, thanks, Srini. I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a trick question in a sense, in that all of those things are probably interrelated and they bleed into one another, and one has an impact on the other. David, some quick thoughts from you on those poll results.
Well, it looks exactly in line. Insider threats, there's the bad actor insider, and then there's the ignorant insider that presses the wrong button or sends the wrong file without checking. But just recently, Jim didn't mention, there's been a couple of big hacks in Korea. We've had one where they managed to lose the contents of the HSS, so that's all the keys for all the SIM cards, and this is a big thing. That was essentially some sort of ransomware infiltration and exfiltration. So those are the most damaging, I'm sure. So I agree.
Yeah, and Hugo, we'll just close the loop with you. Are you surprised that some of those didn't feature, as higher priorities on the list?
Yeah, the insider threat, not to harp on it, but the insider threat one is a tricky one for me, right? We have always thought about networks as having a perimeter that we need to secure and make it harder for people to get in. But the reality that we have seen, particularly with Sol Typhoon in the last year, is that once there is one breach, there's no difference between insider threat and outside perimeter. Like, there is very little consideration that makes an insider threat different once the initial breach has happened. So it added a new layer of complexity to the concept of insider threat for me. Much more to unpack there.
Yeah, okay, many thanks. I mean, obviously those traditional threats are, still very much top of mind for folks here in the audience. But one of the things we wanted to talk about here today was this idea of AI and, AI-powered threats, and AI-powered defense as well, both sides of the coin. So how are you seeing AI being used in telecom security today? And where do you think it's headed in the near future? Hugo, maybe I'll start with you if I can.
Yeah, sure. The introduction of AI for us has been very interesting. I particularly thought that it was going to be a slow adoption, given how new the technology was. But the experience has proved me wrong. Our problem has been quite the opposite, right? We have seen a proliferation of what we know as shadow AI, which is unsanctioned teams publishing and launching and going live with AI models that haven't been vetted by anybody within security. Right? And that has exposed information in a way that we need to control quickly. Right? So that has been one of the first challenges that we have had on the use of AI. Now, how do we look like in the future? There is a number of things that we're going to have to get our arms around. The first one is we need to rationalize the use cases. Right? AI means a lot of different things for many different people, and it's not going to be able to answer all those questions at the same time, right? Partially because of the reliance on cloud AI and how the security risks that it poses, sending data to the cloud to then retrieve the answer. But then having models that are deployed locally with up to 70 billion parameters makes very simple use cases cost prohibitive. right? We call it sometimes delivering a pizza with a Ferrari, right? Like you want to have a very simple answer, very simple query, but you are spending an inordinate amount of money to have that simple use case satisfied. So we need to make sure we standardize, we unify, and also move towards more common AI services, right? Like agentic AI has been mentioned before, which is a natural evolution, but this will make security even more complicated because agentic services have a certain degree of liberty and autonomy that we need to make sure we control.
Yeah, many thanks, Hugo. And Srini, maybe I can come to you next with this one. And there are multiple dimensions to this question, of course, as Hugo has highlighted there. There is our own use of AI as organizations. There is use of AI within the cybersecurity function. And of course, there's the use of AI by the bad actors as well. Yeah, how are you seeing use evolve? And where do you see us being in sort of 12 months' time? What are kind of the key concerns or things to highlight for you in that conversation?
Sure. I think I was actually going through a World Economic Forum report where they've actually conducted a study of close to 800 CISOs, and 70% of them have actually stated that AI and machine learning is actually going to play a big role in significantly either improving their cybersecurity posture, as well as the attackers also driving new forms of attacks onto their network as well as IT infrastructure. Take it network or IT infrastructure, because we're talking about across the board here. In my view, AI really enables attackers to really increase the speed, scale, and sophistication of the attacks. While it does really provide the organization's ability to address these attacks, it's a double-edged sword in my view. When it comes to attackers, they are able to really drive different types of attacks at scale. They are able to, we talked about phishing being extremely effective utilizing generative AI. That's a very good example of how AI can be really used to increase the potential as well as increase the impact that you could actually make on the attacks. But from our perspective, I think it's all about utilizing AI, the traditional AI, the Gen AI, and the agentic AI to improve the posture, the network posture, and how you can actually avert these attacks on a proactive basis. In my view, I think AI really helps the networks to go beyond the traditional signature-based threat detection and response towards, again, you have signature-based and pattern recognition-based. I think you can move beyond that. You can really look at ways and means to anticipate and really counteract sophisticated attacks. And all of these can be recognized and neutralized even before they could happen. So there is a lot of work that the organizations are putting together to bolster their security posture, which can be improved through AI. And their product vendors are also really utilizing AI at scale to really improve their products and enrich their products with capabilities that can help their end customers really drive attack prediction as well as remediation and even proactive detection and neutralization as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Srini. David, let's come to you.
Yeah, just to come back on Srini's point, about prediction, it's not really predicting in an absence of knowledge. So what's happening now is there's networks getting built up. So whenever one network is attacked, then everybody becomes aware of it and then are able to raise defenses accordingly. But one thing, the fingerprinting of attacks, this used to be fairly straightforward. You fingerprint it, and then from then on, that's never going to work again. But what's happening is the AIs are now subtly changing each attack, each attempt. Perhaps for multiple sources was mentioned by Jim, multiple access points. So instead of getting 1,000 attempts from one source, one IP address, you're getting 1,000 attempts from 1,000 source points. And each one of them looks different. And so the old firewall or blocking an IP range doesn't work anymore. So this is sort of a challenge, I think. And I think was brought up, mentioned earlier, about we need AI to fight these AI attacks, to do the correlation across possibly different networks that are not competing, but the security vendor might have a sort of access to monitoring across the networks so that we can all, usable threat intelligence and collaborate in that way to shut these things down before they start getting through.
Yeah, well, let's maybe pick up on that point if we can, David. That idea of integrating AI into our defences in order to combat the bad actors using AI as well. What are some of the practical challenges facing organisations as they look to harness the power of AI within their cybersecurity teams and functions and defences? And how are you seeing organisations overcome some of those challenges?
That's a good question. What you don't do is get your security framework and put it in Chat GPT and tell me what to do, because you've just given away your secrets. And this is sort of the challenges, I think, of some of these large language models that, and perhaps we understand that you don't just type, secure documents and give them on the internet to get it to rephrase it for a presentation, but others don't necessarily understand that. And so I think that's a lot of secure information has leaked into the wider world, and perhaps bad actors can then, you query the same AI and you get now answers to asking questions about the document someone else just put in. So I think this is sort of a great challenge moving forward. What it's going to be, there'll be large language models or AIs dedicated to defensive things, and they will need to be locked down some more securely. The sources of information will need to be more verifiable and checked, because this is one of the problems with AIs training. There's a good example of pictures of elephants, and AI generated elephants all look actually vaguely similar, a similar background, and then you zoom in and you find elephants with three legs and two trunks and so on. And once this data then gets put on the internet and then it gets used as the source information for the next AI, then it might be total trash. And this might work against the cyber defenses as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to that kind of challenge you spoke to earlier on about the insider threats, this idea of people perhaps not being as familiar with how to use these tools effectively and safely. Hugo, let's maybe come to you for some thoughts on this. How are you seeing organisations, and indeed how are you starting to integrate AI into your approach to cybersecurity?
Yeah, so one of the problems that a lot of problems have been mentioned, right? So I'm just going to do a summarization from my own point of view. We have seen the education problem, right? Like people not being very sure about what this can do for me and throwing all sorts of questions to AI without really much regard for where the data is going to end up. Security, right? Like we need guardrails so that the data that is actually put in the AI or the data that is fed to the AI as we use the techniques like RAG, like retrieval augmented generation, is not sensitive data that will end up where we don't want it to be. We also need legal guidance, right? We have had to explore with our legal teams, like, okay, well, if I take a pre-trained model and then I retrain it on my own data, who is the owner of that model? Is it me or is it the person that trained it originally? So we have had to seek legal education on it. And also, we were talking about oversight before, right? And oversight, it also has the component of speeding things up for us. Meaning, when we had single teams spinning their own AI use cases, they were taking weeks and sometimes months to get AIs up and looking somewhat similar to the original use case. When we created a shared platform and we allowed sanctioned approved models to be used by our internal teams, we were able to maybe not bring to market, but productize AI use cases in a matter of 1 or 2 days. So that has helped us tremendously bring AI ideas and use cases to life internally and externally as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hugo. Well, Srini, let's bring you in. Obviously, you have the benefit of talking to multiple different organisations about how they're approaching the AI challenge, how they're thinking about implementing it in their businesses. Is there any kind of best practice emerging around what firms are doing here?
Yeah, I think Hugo and David did talk about a couple of big challenges. And the number one challenge is how do we actually utilize the Gen AI models that are available today, which are more horizontal in nature, and train them with telco-specific data. And that's something which we have experimented a lot, and we've been successful to have these Gen AI models, which are very horizontal in nature, train them with 3GPP specifications, train them with telco threat vectors, and then the enormous information that we've actually collected over a period of 30 years on the telco operations. I think training these Gen AI models is something, training these LLMs is something which we believe as a best practice, which we could really look at. So eventually, when you go and ask queries to that LLM really responds to you with a very specific telco context. And that's why I have been advocating that to implement the IT security practices to the telco is almost tantamount to putting a square plug in a round hole. So that's what I keep advocating. And most of the telcos have kind of realized this, and they have started looking at critical infrastructure specific or network specific security practices and security tools. The other challenges, coming back to your question, the other couple of challenges that I would really like to highlight from a partner perspective is a legacy integration. I think today in telcos, especially in the network, we have a lot of legacy platforms and solutions and applications. And I think bringing them all onto the same page and having them ready to be able to really to be able to get them ready to utilize the next generation wave of AI is a big challenge that we face. And I think Hugo did talk about the data risk as a whole. Last but not the least, it is about driving the operational complexity lower. What we have certainly seen is there in organizations, in majority of our customers, you don't have a single overarching AI initiative which is spread across security. Every team, security operation team start utilizing their own AI tools. Identity and access teams start utilizing their own, excuse me, AI tools. There are silos in which AI tools are being utilized, driving an overarching governance at the organization level, including the selection of the tools and establishing the right operational practices and the data practices that Hugo very nicely alluded to is very, very important towards making these AI initiatives successful in many organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a fast-moving space, and we need to stay agile, as Jim mentioned earlier on. Of course, we're talking a lot about AI here, but it's not the only emerging technology that is, worthy of focus. Of course, quantum computing is becoming ever more real and ever more present in terms of a concern for telcos to start thinking about. So, how should telecom providers start thinking about, quantum-safe security? Let's maybe come to you first, to you, David. I know this is a subject that is close to your heart.
Yes, and first time I must explain that GSMA is not going out and designing quantum computers to solve this problem. But what we have created along with IBM and Vodafone is the Post-Quantum Telecom Network Task Force. It's a bit of a mouthful, but this is a working group that has been going for over 2 years and have produced several documents. And essentially, it's the idea that assuming that quantum computers happen and the encryption algorithms that we use at the moment that we know to be at risk, well, how do you swap them out and what do you swap them to? That's essentially what we're trying to answer in our task force. So, if, for example, one of the first jobs you have to do is then do an inventory of your encryption algorithms and systems across your network. Decide are they at end of life before the quantum day? So do you need to upgrade it, or will it be just retired before sunsetted before you need to do something? So there's been some great progress. NIST, for example, has come out with some quantum safe algorithms just a few months back. Well, actually, maybe 6 months back or so. And the question is not, well, if you decide to implement these, how do you do it? Because of course you can't just do it on one side of the link. You have to do it on both at the same time. But at some point there's going to be this interim period where you have both types of encryption. And in fact, that's one of the reasons we're in the state we're in, because in encryption algorithms, one of the tricks is to downgrade the encryption because it has to support old versions for a while. So it's a lot of challenges, but like I say, we're not trying to do quantum computers, but we're trying to implement algorithms that are known to be safe, and how do you do it? And that's the process we're going through.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, many thanks, David. Again, Hugo, I know that this is something you're working on and thinking about a lot over at Verizon. So how are you starting to think about what post-quantum world might look like?
Yeah, I love hearing David's comment, because a lot of the things that he mentioned, the coexistence of all cryptography with new cryptography, the challenge of inventory, these are things that I talked about every day. So it was very heartwarming to see I'm not the only one. I would say that the scary part of quantum computing for me is that all of today's cryptography is vulnerable. And the good news is that it's not equally vulnerable, right? We can prioritize, and we should prioritize. The way we're going about it in Verizon, at least, is a very military fashion, right? If there is a possibility that quantum computers can get to what we theorize they can get to, we must be prepared for it. However, the possibility is still very much theoretical, right? What we have called a cryptographically relevant quantum computing, CRQC, will have to be much, much bigger and much, much more powerful and stable than what we see today, right? Like the best quantum computers, or the largest quantum computers we see today, have about 1,000 qubits that remain stable for a few milliseconds. RSA estimates that we need a machine with 20 million qubits stable for up to 8 hours to be able to break today's TLS certificate. So we are ways, that situation is ways ahead. But we have to balance two opposing forces. One is the reality, right? That how risky quantum computer is, and how much of an overhaul is going to represent for our network against customers and regulators, right? What's their expectation of us? And as David said, on the reality front, telcos have been here before, right? We migrated from DES and triple DES all the way to AES. After 30 years, AES has been stable for the best part of 25 years, and we're now migrate again. In the telco world, we have evolved and coexisted 3G, 4G, and 5G, and we actually turned off 3G last year. So all of that has coexisted with the same radio channels. So we're not strangers to these major overhauls of technology where things are radically different coexist. The challenge, and this is the other force, the expectations from customers and regulators is that if we see in the news tomorrow that a nation state has a cryptographically relevant quantum computer that can break our cryptography, we must have an answer against that. Right? In the same headline, we should see Verizon announcing that we have cryptography that is already overhauled against that type of attack, and that we will be happy to offer that to our customers. We're working towards that objective.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Great to get some insights into how you're approaching it and some of the things that are top of mind for you. Srini, any thoughts on quantum? I mean, it's happening, right? So we need to start thinking about it. We need to start preparing for it. What are you seeing firms do in this regard? What's the Nokia take?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the key here, and this is and different operators in different parts of the world are at different levels of maturity. And I think Hugo did allude to something which is very, very advanced. And not many operators are actually in the same boat, I would say. The first thing which is very, very important, as we recommend to most of the operators, is to have a crypto inventory readily done. David did allude to that, having a clear understanding of what cryptographic algorithms are you currently using. Yes, 3G is shut down in advanced countries like US, but it is still not shut down. In some countries, 2G and 3G still do coexist. So looking at those, I think having the right cryptographic inventory is very, very important. Number two, having the right processes and tools to monitor on a regular basis your cryptographic practices, as I would say, is absolutely of paramount importance as the standards evolve in this space. And we believe this space is evolving at a very brisk pace. The third and the most important aspect, which I believe is very, very tactical, is to really integrate quantum resisting algorithms into your certificate lifecycle management solution. So you got to really make sure that you have you're monitoring the certificates on a regular basis, and the whole practices are integrated, and these play a pivotal role in ensuring that there is continuous operation and security of these digital certificates throughout the entire life cycle of these certificates. And that's something which I believe is extremely important for organizations to monitor and make sure that it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, many thanks. Listen, David, yeah, you want to chime in?
Yeah, just one thing. I remember Microsoft claimed they were their new marijuana chip. They moved the needle forward by several years. So maybe it's closer than we think.
These things generally are. We always get blindsided. Was it underestimate and overestimate? There's a Bill Gates quote in there somewhere. But listen, folks, this is a fascinating topic, and we could talk about it for hours, I am sure. Sadly, that is all we've got time for today. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. This is a fascinating space. Look forward to checking in with you in 6 months' time and seeing how it's evolved. Stay in touch, and best of luck with everything you're working on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thanks all. Okay, many thanks to David, to Srini, and to Hugo there. And that brings us to the end of our show here today. Thanks to all of our speakers for sharing their insights, and for you folks in the audience for sharing your thoughts in the chat. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and that you're all feeling excited as well as optimistic about the potential here in the telco security space. There's, of course, plenty of challenges to overcome, but there are lots of opportunities here as well. We do have one last poll for you to get some thoughts on the show here today, so please do take a moment to answer that. That should be appearing on screen now. And if you would like to learn more about any of the ideas we have spoken about today, please do feel free to reach out to any of our speakers on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be only too happy to provide any help on that journey. There's also a link to some further reading on the Nokia website in the chat, which might be helpful as you're formulating your next steps. And I'm aware that we also ran a poll earlier that we didn't have time to discuss, so we will share the results of that with you post-event. Other than that, we are pretty much out of time. Take care, everybody. Best of luck with everything you're working on, and we hope to see you back here at the next event soon. From everybody here in the studio, thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.